Welcome to the Situation Report today. Very glad to have you joining along. This is the show where we do our best every single episode, 3 times a week, to give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. And culture is changing all of the time. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone that is watching or listening. Culture is changing, it's shifting, things are happening. This week even, things have happened every single day that are major shifts in culture, certainly in the media and in the media landscape, and that impacts our culture. A lot's happening all of the time, and the question is, how do we navigate that as people who seek to do the best we can personally, as people who love liberty and freedom and individuality, and we want to pursue our God-given goals and purposes, as those who have families that we want to care for, children that we want to create or maintain a country that they would be proud to live in. How do we navigate all of this? It's very challenging, and I'm grateful to have a guest on today who spends her time thinking about all of these issues. Great to have on today Sydney Watson. If you don't know Sydney, you need to. Sydney is the star of the aptly named Sydney Watson YouTube channel. I laugh because she always calls it the creatively named Sydney Watson YouTube channel. Incredible content there. She is a political commentator and journalist. Very grateful to have her with us. Sydney, thank you for joining us. And as we jump into our conversation today, a lot of very kind of specific cultural issues that I'd like to talk about, tyranny issues I'd like to talk about. But before we jump into that, tell us about yourself and how you got into this world of journalism.
Well, thank you for having me for starters. This is really exciting for me, and I'm glad that we got to connect. As far as me getting involved in this world, it was a pretty straightforward experience. I actually randomly just one day decided that I wanted to make a piece of content about gun laws, because that's something that I care about a lot. And given that Australia has some very strange opinions towards guns and perceptions of guns, I was tired of people trying to compare America and Australia as an apples to apples thing, because they're not. I mean, they're not even remotely related. And so I made this video. It went viral, which was a very interesting experience given that it was my first piece of content. And from there, I kind of just got started in the space because I'd always been politically motivated and interested, but never had actually taken the time to participate in any real capacity. And then from there, I got picked up by, I guess, our version, I suppose, of Fox News, Sky News Australia, and I started commentating there. And then, just kept making content, kept making YouTube videos.
What caused you to move from Australia to the United States?
Well, the short answer is I always say that Australia is a bit like a prison. just because it's actually quite challenging, at least in my view, to get ahead. And so I'm someone, obviously, who cares a lot about the trajectory of our countries. I care so much about the way that Australia is heading and the United States. And so I just was like, well, I can't really talk about politics in Australia because nobody cares. They're very ambivalent to it. So I was like, all right, well, let me jump on a plane and do the 15-hour trek to the United States. And then it sort of took off from there, where I just felt like people here really, really care about freedom, and they really care about preserving their freedom. And that was something I could get behind.
We are watching things happen in Australia right now that I think from an outsider's perspective is shocking. I don't know another way to say it. But it also serves as a really good example of where the United States could end up if we don't make better decisions. I've been to Australia one time. I spent 3 weeks there in 2000. And it was a crazy experience for me. I was serving in the Marine Corps. I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. As part of our deployment and our training, we ended up in Australia. And I'll never forget kind of the breath of fresh air that it was going from Japan to Australia. And there were a lot of reasons for that. Culturally, it's similar enough that it felt like being home. But just the kindness of the people, the feeling of freedom, and just kind of the individuality. You can be who you want to be. You can do what you want to do. We trained with the Australian Army. That was awesome. I spent a week in Brisbane by myself, just kind of wandering around. Just an incredible experience. And so now, whatever it is, 20 years later, 22 years later, watching the things that are happening in Australia, it's sad, it's shocking, it's puzzling, it's confusing. Can you talk about the journey, perhaps, of a country like Australia that I think for most of the world represents rugged individuality, doing your own thing, and now we're here. Why are we here?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for pronouncing Brisbane correctly because one of my favorite things to do with Americans is to say, "Hey, pronounce this Australian city name."
Right,
And they're always like
right.
Brisbane, and I'm like, no.
Yeah,
Or
right.
Canberra, where they're like Canberra, and I'm like, it's
Right.
yes, so close, so close.
So close.
And the other thing too that and I know this is not necessarily what we're talking about, but given that you were in the Marine Corps and that you trained a little bit with Aussies, I always hear from people that Australian soldiers are some of the like most badass crazy people.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
awesome.
that's really
Yeah,
nice.
training with them was incredible. So it is a crazy story. Just since we're on it, we were on it's an LHD. It had helicopters. We were swapping, so we were on some of the Australian helicopters, and they were on ours. And I think it was 12 Australian soldiers were on one of our helicopters. It lifted off the ship and landed in the water. That's not the plan, right? So this was their first experience with the American military, and they got pulled out. They were all fine, and all they said was, "Yeah, we're not doing that again." And they just went on. Like it didn't even shake them up. And that was my whole experience with the Australian Army. We trained for several weeks, and yeah, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, Aussies they're a different breed, and it's
Different breed.
This is what's been so sad though, watching what's going on back home, is that again because Aussies are really politically ambivalent. They don't often, like the majority of them, don't actually know who's in power. They don't care, even though you have to vote. You get fined if you don't in Australia. The majority of them just do not care whatsoever about politics. And so I think over the last 2 years, it's been really strange for me to observe how many of them have kind of bended a knee, because that doesn't really seem to me, at least, to be the prevailing way that Australians are. Of course, I think in part they do sort of serve daddy government in the sense that they would pick security over freedom. And I think that is an inbuilt way of behaving that's come from the Brits, because the Brits are a lot like that. And I think that we're much closer related and much closer in our behavior to the British than to Americans, say. But still, by and large, like actual true Aussies that are out in the bush that have their farms and, ride their dirt bikes and do normal things, they're normal people who just want to be left alone. So I think that's why at least the protests in Australia were so large, because I'm assuming that they were made up of those true blue kind of Aussie people. And then everybody in the city, like here in the US, are just buttheads, just total buttheads that make decisions for everybody else. So, it's funny because even now looking back, I don't really know what to make of a lot of this. And I started off quite hardlined about it because I was like, yeah, given that I'm an Australian, I left in part because I couldn't stand the mentality of the city that I came from, which is sort of, I guess, the equivalent of California or LA. It's got that vibe of like, oh, we love being told what to do. Oh, please tell us what to do. Oh, please tax us into oblivion. And I hated it. I was like, God, this sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I left because I couldn't stand the leftism that I came from. But I don't necessarily know anymore if that's representative of all Australians. It's just such a weird country, I have to tell you.
So two issues that, here we've been talking about, why is this happening? One of the issues, and you mentioned this off the top, is gun control. I am of the opinion, well, first of all, I agree with you that comparing the United States to any other country, just in terms of scope and our our love affair with firearms and those kind of things, it's just a different thing. Like, you can't compare the two. But I really believe, and this is something we were talking about here yesterday, that having gun control is not what allows this to happen. It's getting to the point where you would allow the government to take your guns away that allows this to happen. Is there a connection between, the level of gun control, and I'm not even sure exactly what it is. I know they didn't take away all of the guns, but I know that was a big part of it. Is there a connection between that and what we've seen happen? I guess the big question is this. Here in the United States, we talk about the Second Amendment a lot, and often we say we hang on to our guns so the government can't, do those things to us.
Right.
So we can prevent tyranny. Is that a reality, and has that happened in Australia, or are the two not connected at all?
That is actually a really fantastic question. I think overall the relationship to firearms in Australia is different. So I would assume that even if we had access to them in the same capacity that Americans do, I don't see Australians taking up arms against the government. I just don't think they're wired that way. Again, I think that there's a lot of this sort of like inbuilt I don't know the correct terminology. Perhaps a trust in the government, so that when the government does things that do not align with the public's perception, they give a lot more
Right.
benefit of the doubt. Something that a lot of Americans, particularly, and leftist Americans don't understand is that your average Australian has never seen, held, or fired a firearm. They just haven't.
Wow.
And so when they come into
Yeah.
contact with them, they're kind of shocked and they're like, what is this thing? But even so, like, since day dot, Australia was not founded because there was a war. There was no war for independence. It was settled.
Sure.
And the majority of people who came to Australia were settled. They were not convicts. So it's not like they were these lawless people that were running around trying to decapitate everybody.
Right.
Much as that would be actually a lot cooler than what really happened.
That'd be a great story. It's just not reality.
Yeah, exactly. No, that would be way neater. And I wish my family was like that. We came over on a boat. How boring. How utterly boring. I guess everyone did, didn't they really? Anyway, so yeah, the Aussie sentiment towards firearms is totally different, but also there's not as many in circulation. We have never used them for self-defense purposes. In fact, it's clearly stated in our legislation in the country, in the laws, that you cannot use firearms for self-defense purposes. A couple years ago, when I got my firearms license, I had to go through the process, and you have to do all this training and this, that, and the other. And you have to give them a reason, like a good reason, a legitimate reason for wanting a firearm. Self-defense is not an accepted one of those reasons. And also fighting the government is not one either. So
You're right, sure.
Yeah, so it's for like hunting or, clay pigeon shooting or, whatever your interests are. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's any way to compare the two, because I don't think that they have any similarities. Aussies are not going to rise up against the government with guns. I think that's just a fact.
I'm always trying to look for the lessons learned, right? And for Americans, I think we look at that and go, and this comparison that's made all the time is if they had their guns, they would be able to defend themselves. But I'm not even sure that would happen in the United States. I mean, frankly, I know we talk about it, and we're really big on that. I live in California, so it's not as big a deal. In Texas, every Texan says they would go after whoever. I'm just not sure that's the case, and I'd like to believe it is. I think there are pockets of people that would, but by and large, I think once that decision's made, it's already been made.
Well, here's the question: do you think your average American could run up a hill with a gun and then shoot at someone? Because I don't think. Yeah.
I don't think your average gun owner could do that. I train all the time. I shoot all the time, and if you don't, you may own a gun. You're probably going to hurt yourself. I think even the statistics on people who have had others break into their house and they were gun owners who didn't shoot somebody are pretty alarming. So yeah, I don't think the comparison is there.
Yeah.
The other kind of issue is China, and maybe you can speak to this. I believe that a lot of the reaction of Australia to COVID and lockdown policies is because of the influence of China. Is that a reality? And is that a perspective that we should look at?
Well, yes. So yes, I do think that China has a considerable impact on Australia, and I think that they have been meddling in the things that Australian governments do for quite some time. I don't think that anybody would deny that. Particularly, again, the state that I come from, good old Victoria. There's been speculation that the premier, who I guess is the equivalent of a governor, that he has very, very deep ties with the CCP, and that, he's done things in the past that kind of indicate that his response to this pandemic is not simply because he is a sociopathic dictatorial psychopath, but also because he is feeding into, whatever the China response has been. It is, I guess, in some capacity trying to emulate that. China has a massive impact on Australia. Their proximity, for one thing, I guess would indicate that, they have their fingers in this pie because they can. And it's kind of funny because, how everyone's really concerned about, the Ukraine, Russia thing, how this is going to turn into World War III. I've said since day dot that actually, if anything, I think China invading Taiwan would result in World War III. And I think it's because ultimately they would end up bombing Australia, and that would sort of force everybody's hands. So the short answer is yes. They have a massive impact on Australia, and yes, that has totally informed the COVID response.
Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their lives. He created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for you and me. Mike found the world's best cotton called Giza. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. Sale of the year. That means it's not going to happen again. This is the sale of the year. What is it? For a limited time, you will receive 60% off the Giza Dream Sheets that comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You will receive a set for as low as $39.99. For a limited time, with any purchase, you will receive Mike's soft cover book free when you use promo code SITREP. Go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use promo code SITREP. Along with this offer, you will also get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow mattress topper, MyPillow towel sets, and so much more. For those of you that would rather use the phone, and some of you are out there, you know who you are, call 1-800-870-0283. Use the promo code SITREP or mypillow.com and use the promo code SITREP. When you look at all of that, here in the United States, what lessons can we learn? What are some things that Australia has done that set them up for what they're dealing with right now, whether it's the lockdowns or, all of the things that have happened over the last year and a half? What are some things Americans need to see and learn from?
Well, I think number one is that if you value security over freedom, there's a bit of a problem there because there's no actual ever promise of true security from the government because at the end of the day, they don't control every single variable that could possibly happen. And the other thing too, it's sort of like a devil you know situation. If you're saying, well, best to trust the government because ultimately they'll be the one to back me and to protect me when things go wrong, it's just absurd. I mean, all government is a bunch of people that are unchecked, doing whatever they want, unchecked. There's nobody who comes in and says, oh, nope, bad on you. And even it's funny in the Australian context with the Australian government just, going loopy and doing whatever the hell it wants, at least federally. The Queen technically could fire them, but even she hasn't done anything like that. So our one check and balance has kind of gone out the window. So I think what Americans need to first understand is that point, security over freedom, not a thing. But I think Americans are great with that anyway, because they do value freedom, at least, even if it's in a small capacity, they still really, really value that, at least in some sense. I think the other thing too is Aussies are very trusting. And I love that about them. It makes them so warm, but it also makes them buttheads sometimes. And I say that with all the love in the world. The fact that they kind of just go, oh, just one more lockdown, it'll be over. Oh, just one more shot and it'll be over. Oh, just one more booster and it'll be over. It's just absurd because we don't live in a world anymore where it's just one more and then it'll be done. I mean, you're dealing with, again, dictatorial people who want to take as much power and control as they can. And Aussies, for some reason, just are so trusting that they don't realize that just one more will never apply. The government and these politicians and these leaders will take and take and take and take. And it's not until you actually crack it and you say, I've had enough, absolutely not, that they go, oh crap, we've crossed the line, let's back up a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing is, like, how often does government or the politicians or elites ever give you back your freedom? I mean, like hardly ever. I mean, Canada realized that, didn't they? When
you look at culture, you talk a lot about culture, and a lot of things that are happening culturally in the United States scare me much more than what's happening politically in the United States. And I really personally believe that politics will follow culture. What are some things that are happening in our culture right now that scare you, that concern you, that we've got to stop or we're going to end up in the wrong spot?
Everything? No.
Yeah. Well, there are some good things happening, but more bad, yes.
Yeah. Oh God, that's okay. The trans kid stuff really freaks me out. And I've kind of come to the realization that, and this might sound completely loopy and your audience might be like, this girl is insane. But
we'll just say you're from Australia, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Just be like, she's from the bottom of the planet, and they have, they're loopy anyway. No, I'm actually I'm concerned about this because I feel like this is a bizarre way of sterilizing people. I know that sounds so crazy, but if you think about it, there's this like very aggressive push for kids to be on things like puberty blockers until they can determine what sex they are. And things like that. And the reality is that puberty blockers, there's never been a longitudinal study looking at the effects of them on young people for this purpose. I mean, and for people who don't know, for anyone who doesn't know that's listening to this, puberty blockers were never actually used for this purpose. The drug, one of them is called Lupron, for example, has never been used for this purpose. So we have no bloody idea what this does to people in the long run. And the fact that they're so flippant about it and they're like, oh, just just give them the drug. It's fine. It's gotta be fine.
Yeah.
You're sterilizing kids. You're sterilizing them. And this really worries me, because I think, how is it that we're being so cavalier about taking away a child's opportunity to potentially in the future have offspring, or even just, why are we so fine with mutilating them? I don't know. It's really weird. I don't have kids yet, and I'm hoping to in the next couple years just like produce some tiny Sydneys. And so looking at this as like a future mum, I hope is like horrifying. I'm like, what are we doing and why are we doing this? That's a big one.
Yeah, I do have kids, and it is horrifying. I'll tell you, so my two oldest are in their 20s. My youngest two are 14 and 12. And I'm not concerned for them. I've had the ability to really protect them. We homeschool. I mean, we keep them away from a lot of these things. Mm-hmm. But I'm very concerned about my grandkids and a generation coming up behind all of this. One of the things that really concerns me about that in particular, it's not an evil perspective on sexuality. I think we could go back, thousands of years and see that that's always been present. Mm-hmm. It's the mainstreaming of it.
Yes.
And it's the fact that major corporations like Disney and many others are defending it as though it's a good thing. And it's so puzzling. I mean, I don't know if I would go as far as to say the goal is sterilization. Certainly that's a consequence.
Yeah.
But I think there are other goals. Why are companies defending these policies?
Well, I think it's sort of jumping on the woke train, right? I mean, I've thought about this a lot, because I always think to myself, do you remember the Gillette ad that came out a couple years ago, where they, and excuse my language, but they effectively all over their primary demographic. They were like, men are toxic and horrible, and boys will be boys. Haha, don't say that. And I watched this and I was like, are you guys on crack? Like, what? Like, why? How is this a good marketing move? How is this a good move at all? And then I think over the years, I've thought about this quite a lot, because you often see many companies participating in the workification, I suppose, of their own brands to the detriment of their own brands. I mean, say Nike. This is a good example of where it worked. They partnered with Kaepernick, who is, beloved by, Black Americans, and it did very well for them. I mean, they sold a crap ton of sneakers. Whereas Gillette, I'm pretty sure, took a massive, massive dive with the Gillette brand, because they, like I said, they just went, we don't care. We actually hate you. All of you, go away. So I think it's because we're at a point where the leftism, or at least the leftist values, take priority over making money. And that's a really strange place to be, because I don't think the right operates like that. And that's potentially, I think, in some capacity why we're losing. Because the rich people on the right wing are like, I want something out of this situation. Even though, they may have enough expendable income where they could just put money towards a project and go, cool, I'm okay with not getting anything back. I just want to fund the project. Whereas I think lefties are a lot better at doing this. They're like, well, I don't necessarily need anything back, but I want to push this idea. So as far as Disney and whatnot, I think that it ultimately is about just setting a narrative and setting an agenda at the expense of making money. I mean, aren't they closing down Disney Channel as well? Isn't that getting nixed at some point?
I don't know about the Disney Channel. I know I read this week that they've lost 3 million subscribers to Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And their stock, as a former owner of Disney stock, former as in like last week, I lost a lot of money on my Disney stock, and I sold it off to get rid of it. Yeah. But so there is a real profit consequence to what some of these companies are doing. Mm-hmm. You look at CNN. Today it was reported that CNN Plus, which they invested billions of dollars in standing up, CNN Plus was closed down today. Netflix lost, I think, 30% or something.
200,000 subscribers.
So there is a real profit consequence. And I think one of the things, maybe it's naive, but that gives me hope, is that we have to go through a really painful season with these companies and with the woke policies and the rest of it, but that eventually Americans will say, yeah, we're not going to support that anymore. Mm-hmm. And I hope that's the reality. I hope that the reality of that will push some of these companies to make better decisions.
Well, yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. But I mean, realistically, I put this back to you. Do you think that it will? Because if they're willing to lose money on their ideas or on pushing stupid narratives and things that actually don't align with their audiences or their primary demographics, I guess my question back is, if they've already demonstrated that their primary audiences don't really matter to them, then what incentive do they have to abandon the crazy ideology?
Yeah, I don't know that they have an incentive. I'm hopeful that what they'll do is what I would hope they would do is just step it back and say, we're a company, we produce a product, we want to sell our product to whoever will buy it. Mm-hmm. I think some companies will do that. Hopefully what's happening to Disney, the state of Florida last night, over like 3 days, decided they would take away the tax exempt status from Disney. And bring them into the municipality of Orlando. That's a huge deal. It's like $200 million a year lost to Disneyland, Disney World. So what I hope will happen is that smaller companies that are trying to get on the woke train will look at that and go, we're not Disney, we're not Nike, we're not these companies. We don't have the margins to make that happen. And so we need to sell a product and keep our mouth shut. I'm hopeful that's what will happen. And on the other hand, I just hope that they will lose their influence with people like us. That people like us will stop just giving them a pass because they're Disney or because they're Netflix or whatever. I had to sit my kids down this last week and go, look, we love Disney. We like Disney Plus because of, these great shows that are on there, and there's some great shows on there. They're an incredible entertainment company, obviously, but we're not going to support what they're doing because what they're doing is wrong. And my hope is that many, many other families have done the same thing and they'll lose their influence. So I think there are other ways, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, even I was watching, I actually really, really like cartoons. It's so bad. It's like I can't outgrow this stuff. I don't know why. But I was watching Hercules the other night, the old school Hercules, because I just love the songs and whatever. And I was thinking to myself, I really miss these days because some of the jokes in it, watching it back, I was like, oh my goodness. And they were funny, but there was none of this like wokey, just ridiculous nonsense in it. And it was so enjoyable. And I don't know how related this is necessarily to Disney, but even I was thinking about this in terms of video games, because I love gaming. I do it just, so working in this space, you can probably relate to this. It's so I don't murder. If I'm hacking people up in the game, I feel a lot better. But there's two games that I love in my, RPG kind of world, and that's Horizon, which is like you kill machines. And then this other game called God of War, which is predicated on Greek mythology and now Norse mythology. And I was telling another gamer friend of mine the other day that it really annoyed me it annoys me as a general rule, how even in video games, this wokeism is inserting itself. And I guess they do it because they want you to be mad and they want you to talk about it. But in the new God of War, for example, which is coming out at the end of this year, it's called Ragnarok. And it's about Norse mythology, where we're dealing with Norse gods. They made one of the Norse gods black, which again, if you want to I just don't understand why this sort of thing happens because I don't care. Like if you're an original character, black, white, Asian, I don't care. But this person in mythology is described as blonde and blue haired. Why are we changing her race? Why are we changing people's sex? It's the same thing with the new Thor thing. It just drives me crazy because I think this is so unnecessary. It's just pandering.
We have, so there's the gender thing. That's a huge issue. The transgender movement is huge. I did a show on this a couple weeks ago. Just from so many perspectives, it's destructive. But then we talk about critical race theory and so many of these other issues, liberties being taken away. What can Americans do? This is kind of what I try to boil everything down to. What are some practical things that real Americans who don't live in Texas can do to try to, either stave that off or push it back or help to turn the ship around? We're in a difficult spot. I'm very hopeful. We're Americans. We've had, difficult times in the past, but what do we need to do right now to get back on track?
Well, I always say to at least my audience that if they really care and they really want to get involved, the one thing that you can do and the most important thing you can do is get involved at a local level. I think that there's a lot to be said for, going and harassing the school that your kids go to if they are teaching psycho things and making sure that a bunch of other parents get in on that with you and give them hell, basically. Because at the end of the day, squeaky, what's the thing? Squeaky hinge gets the oil?
The squeaky wheel.
Yeah, there you go.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah, you kick the can enough times, someone's gonna go, "Can you shut up?" And then you can orchestrate some change. I have a lot of respect for parents who do those sort of things. I also think getting involved with your local school board or, running for some local office is a really great way as well. But in terms of, people who don't want to do any of that stuff, because there's a lot of people who don't want to be politicians, and I completely respect that. Boycotting people that don't represent your values. My friends think I'm insane because if I go into even a restaurant and everyone's masked up or doing social distancing, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to support tyranny. I'm not going to give you my money. And I just leave because I feel really strongly about that. And I hope that other people who also feel strongly about that would take those sort of measures, because if enough people don't go into your restaurant because of your inane policies, you probably will think about changing those inane policies. Yeah. I think that there's just not enough aggressive pushback from conservatives, because I think conservatives a lot of the time want to take the high road, and that's very noble. And I cannot criticize that mentality, but I don't think it's working presently, because I don't think we're operating in an ordinary set of circumstances. We're kind of in like a kind of wartime culturally. So I just think, constantly trying to be passive or trying to be a pacifist, not helpful. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy on that. I don't know. I don't know if that's a widely shared opinion. So
yeah, I think that's right. I honestly believe that when people en masse make the pain of submitting greater than the pain of liberty and freedom, then things will change. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's been an awakening for conservatives over the last year and a half or whatever? I mean, I know even for me, and I've been involved in, kind of this world for a long time. I'm very conservative. I grew up very conservative. I love America. I served our country. But even me, I just kind of went, well, the government's not that bad. They're going to be fine. And then COVID hit and things changed. And you can't make that claim anymore. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's been an awakening generally?
Yeah. Oh my God, yes. Yeah. I think Biden has red-pilled a lot of people.
Sure, right.
What I'm noticing, and I would be interested to hear your take on this too, what I'm noticing is that a lot of people who are center-left-ish are kind of waking up and going, wait a minute, that doesn't jive. And they're sort of maneuvering and moving sort of closer to maybe the center or maybe to the right wing. And I'm even seeing that with my leftist friends who have, been like dyed in the wool, not commies necessarily, but kind of on that level. People I love but just cannot talk to politically have even gone, wait a minute, Sydney, wait a minute. Maybe you're not a loony after all. But something I've noticed, and again, I would be interested to hear your take on this, is that people who were right-wing have gone very far to the right. And that's been a really, really weird shift for even me to observe, because there are people that are getting so angry with what's going on and so enraged that I think they're kind of falling off the edge of the cliff. And I'm not discrediting their anger. I feel it. I'm sure you feel it. I'm sure the people that you work with feel it. And, all of our loved ones do too. But I'm also like, I don't know how helpful this is. And so that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm noticing, yes, there is a definite shift. And I think people are waking up and they're having their eyes opened, even if it's slow sometimes. And then there's people who are just like going way to the edge of the cliff and falling right off. Yeah,
I completely agree with that. I think more than leftists that scream all of the time, I'm more bothered by people on the right who scream all of the time. Mm-hmm. Social media for large right-wing pundits, it drives me insane, because there is no moderation, there's no clarity, no nuance. There are no facts. Yep. It's the same. We're talking about a bill that is probably going to be passed here in California, and it's horrible. But the way that it's being positioned by people on the right is not what it is. Well, it's really hard to fight against something if you're also lying about it, just like people on the left lie about it. And so I agree. I think there needs to be a little bit of moderation, not softening, but just clarity and honesty, and maybe we've lost some of that. Yeah. But agreed. People on the left, I think, are looking, going, there's got to be a better way, and hopefully we're seeing a change there. Yeah,
I think we are. I think that's very true. And I mean, it's kind of hard not to, though, because if you think about it, even again, there's one of my good girlfriends. She's super cute. She used to be very left wing, and then kind of was like, wait a minute, and then has started this progression over to the right. And she posted something the other day, and I messaged her, and I was like, you're fully right wing now, aren't you? And she was like, yeah, it's happened. I'm like, okay, welcome to the club.
Welcome to the other side.
Yeah, we're a lot nicer, and everyone's more attractive.
That's a very bold statement, although I think it's probably true.
Well, we wash, you see, and cut our hair typically.
And we're not living in a basement in the dark.
Exactly.
I think that helps too when you get out in front of other people.
Yeah, we don't consume the souls of babies, as it were.
as it were, and as it is, and that's a huge, man, that's another whole topic we could spend a long time on. What is going to happen? Midterms are quickly coming upon us. I know you probably, well, I don't know this, but I believe you probably don't have a crystal ball, but I'm sure you have some opinions. What's going to happen, and are we going to be better off on the other side?
Okay, you have to understand first and foremost that I am a pessimist. So, and I freely admit this. I just am a pessimist.
I respect that.
Yeah, I look at everything and I go, this is not going to work out. I'm hopeful though. This is really the first time that in a long time that I'm really hopeful that, this year might actually turn things around. Even I was just talking with a girlfriend of mine because we might go troll Beto because he's having an event here actually today. And I was saying to her, let's go. Because I don't want him to win here in Texas. I would be mortified. Yeah. And he got so close when in his race with Ted Cruz. That was such a slim margin that it's horrifying to me to think that, any bloody leftist might control this state. But I will say that I feel like the right wing is angry. And I feel like a lot of people, even on the left, like we were just saying, are angry. And so I do have hope that people will actually turn up and vote, at least in the midterms. And don't get me wrong, I think politicians are buttheads across the board, even if they're left or right. And I think that a lot of them are full of hot air. But at least if people are invigorated to get involved and to actually start caring, even just for the purposes of, who should I vote for? It might find them, stumbling upon other information that informs other views that they have, and that might inform, their behavior out in the world. So I actually am really hopeful that this year will turn some things around. But that being said, we still have Biden in office, and he's a potato head. And I'm not super sure that he's going to live much longer, if I'm being completely honest. And Kamala would be a train wreck. So there's that.
Sure. Well, you just took pessimism, turned it into optimism, and then brought us right back to pessimism. So good job on that. That was a really good segue and a good turn. Man, so many other things we could talk about for sure, but where can people follow you, follow your show? Where would you like to point people to?
Probably the best place is my creatively named channel on YouTube, Sydney Watson, where I make deep dive content, I suppose. If you want to see me, attack people on Twitter, that's always fun. I try to be my pessimistic self over there. And on Instagram, if you want to see all the hilarious memes. I just figure people can just search Sydney Watson. I feel like I'm the first one that pops up. But otherwise, if you can't find it, then you must not be looking hard enough.
You're not trying hard enough. Awesome. Well, Sydney Watson, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And man, hopefully we can have you back on. It'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
We were not made to live in isolation. Sadly, many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day.
A lot of guys end up drinking, a lot of guys end up losing hope. Someone will go to the VA and they'll try to get, prescription medications to help with PTSD. They'll get pills for anxiety, they'll get pills because they can't sleep. Now they'll get pills for depression before they know it. They're taking 12 different medications. And when it's not working out, these guys lose hope. And that's why there's 23 guys a day committing suicide.
The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. As a result, we've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live.
Everything they said just kept hitting me in the heart over and over and over again. It's like all the things that I didn't know that I needed to hear. And I opened my heart to God that week, dude, and I've been a different person ever since.
Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. We provide our programs and resources, including travel, at no cost to our warriors.
I remember talking to a licensed social worker who actually handed me a pamphlet to Mighty Oaks. So I went. Yeah, I'm glad I did.
By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. Our mission is to serve and restore our nation's warriors and families who have endured hardship through their service to America, and to help them find new life purpose through hope in Christ. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org. Thank you, Sydney, for joining us. What a great conversation and just some incredible perspectives. It's always interesting, enlightening to talk to someone who comes from a different background than we do in the United States and just kind of a better perspective on what's happening globally and some of the things that we're doing here in the United States and the impact that they will have if we're not careful and if we don't work to turn these things around. And so appreciate Sydney's perspective on all of those things. Please check out her YouTube channel, search for her name, follow her on social media. You'll be thankful that you did. If you are not yet subscribed to this show, make sure that you subscribe right now. You're listening somewhere. You're listening on a podcast platform of your choice. The great thing about that is you can stay there, but you can also subscribe. So subscribe. That lets you know when new episodes come out 3 times a week. We are pushing great content to you with incredible guests like Sydney and want to make sure you don't miss one. If you'd like to watch the video, and we do record video, some of you watch that, many of you just listen, that's fine. But if you'd like to watch the video, go over to salemnow.com, salemnow.com. We are blessed to be on the Salem Podcast Network and on the Salem Video Network as well, and that is salemnow.com. Check that out. That would be fantastic. Thank you for joining us. We will talk to you next time.